It is an interesting one. I hear this Week 10 waiver wire getting bashed all over the internet. Every waiver wire show I listen to and prep for this say, oh, this is the one you just want to sit out. It's not the best of the year. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I got to hype everything up, but there are definitely some gems with real potential, especially at tight end in a week with a lot of buys. Brock Bowers, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft. I think there are going to be some massive week swingers if you get the right ones at tight end. Plus a wide receiver, I think, could be an every week wide receiver 2 or 3 for you. Running back stashes are updated and lots of new names to consider. So we have a lot to dive into. And last, of course, is those quarterbacks. I got 3 names, and I think any one of them could be top 12 quarterbacks the rest of the season. So let everybody else bash the waiver wire as much as they want to. We will be here diving into everything. But real quick, I did want to dive into the quick trade deadline recap and let you know who was moved and where. And then we'll dive into their fantasy prospects, the ones that matter, in just a little bit. There's 3 really names you need to worry about. And of course, we already know that there were some big trades this NFL offseason. We had, not this offseason, rather this season, DeAndre Hopkins going to Kansas City, Devontae Adams going to the Jets. We had some really big moves. Amari Cooper going to the Bills. Throughout the season so far, it was just more so the deadline was a bit of a whimper. The only 3 offensive players moving today that were of note that we haven't already covered in previous shows are Khalil Herbert going to the Bengals, Mike Williams going to the Steelers for a 5th-round pick, and the bone-headed, just complete brain-scratcher move of the day, Jonathan Mingo going to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. We saw Hopkins go for a conditional 5th. We saw Deontay Johnson go for a 5th, 6th pick swap. And Jonathan Mingo goes for a 4th-round pick. Make it make sense. I tweeted that out earlier, and I just keep getting all these responses. You don't understand the salary cap, bro. The rookie-controlled cost deal. That's the big difference here. Yay, you get to cost control a pile of mulch. What has Jonathan Mingo done that warrants a 4th-round pick at all? Makes literally no sense to me. 2.2 catches and 22.5 yards per game. 539 scoreless yards through 24 professional games. Makes 0 sense. I don't understand all these comments. Check it out if you want some fun entertainment at Roto Street Wolf. And maybe you disagree with me. Feel free to come on there. But it just continues to make me laugh. Of course, I understand. Yeah, they're aging veterans. Yeah, the contracts aren't great. But why are the Cowboys even trading for anyone in the first place? Dak is now on the injured reserve, going to miss at least 4 games. They're 3-5. It's a lost season. What have they seen in Jonathan Mingo that warrants a 4th-round pick if you're going to trade for a wide receiver? Why him and why at that price? It makes literally 0 sense to me. If you think it makes any sense, please feel free to hit me up in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter. And if you just want to laugh at all the people justifying this trade, maybe it's just delusional Cowboy fans. I have no idea what it is, but that move makes literally 0 sense. But again, you guys don't care about that. That doesn't matter for your fantasy prospects. Nobody's running out to pick up Jonathan Mingo in any league, shape, or size. We will talk about Khalil Herbert and Mike Williams when we get to those respective positions, because both of those guys are largely available on your waiver wires, and both of them are towards the top 15 in my waiver wire pickups, including Khalil Herbert up in that top 10, maybe top 5. We'll see when we get there later tonight, folks. But let's dive into the quarterback position. As I alluded to, I think there are 3 guys potentially as top 12 quarterbacks the rest of the season, depending on how things shake out. We'll start with my first and number 1 waiver wire quarterback of the week. That's Justin Herbert, 42% rostered on Yahoo, and he is starting to cook, folks. He goes 18 of 27, 282 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Very hyper-efficient day for him. This is coming off a 24-point effort where he ran for 49 yards and also threw multiple scores the week before. So he is really starting Justin Herbert to heat up every single day. It seems like we have Jim Harbaugh just gushing over this guy, and deservedly so. They got both since the bye. Both tackles have come back. Herbert seems to be at full health, and they've really started to cater this offense around him. When they had those first weeks 1 through 5, one of the most run-heavy attacks in the league, bottom 3 in pass rate over expectation. And since the bye week, they have now gone from averaging 23 pass attempts per game to just under 35 pass attempts per game across these last 3. It has been awesome for Justin Herbert. They are in a top 10 pass rate over expectation rate right now for the Chargers, and he is playing some really, really solid ball. As Ladd McConkey emerges, as Quentin Johnston returns, we definitely could see Justin Herbert ultimately finish as a top 12 quarterback from here on out. Another guy that's out there in well over half of leagues that seems to be spiking at the right time for you folks is Aaron Rodgers. I get it. If you just want to skip past this one, locker room presence, you hate the guy, you don't want him ever commanding your fantasy team. I honestly probably fall in that bucket. I'm just trying to look purely at the stats to help you guys out. I don't think I'd ever have Aaron Rodgers as my fantasy QB. I do not want him shaking up the locker room, going on darkness retreats on my fantasy team here. I cannot have that message sent to the youngsters. But 211 yards and 3 touchdowns on Thursday Night Football against the Houston Texans. Ultimately scored 20 fantasy points, a season high so far, but he has 17 or more in 3 of his last 4 games, averaging over 18 points per game across his last 4 is Aaron Rodgers, and 2 of those matchups were bottom 3, including Pittsburgh and Buffalo. So Rodgers starting to cook, and you look at the rest of season schedule among the top 5 for quarterbacks. 5 of the next 6 matchups are top 12 in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. Arizona, Indianapolis, bye week. Then you got Seattle. 1 tougher matchup against Miami, but we're starting to see little cracks in that defense. You wrap up the season with the best possible matchup with the Jags and then the Rams. Buffalo, the toughest matchup there at the end of the season in your fantasy championship. But Aaron Rodgers in a platoon at minimum, you could stream him and get some quality productions, in my opinion. But if those guys are both gone, over 40% rostered there, well, 11% rostered Drake May is sitting there for the taking. In his 3 full games this year, he's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. He's one of the only 10 quarterbacks to do that since week 6. He's averaging over 9 yards per carry, over 5 rush attempts per game. This is mini Josh Allen, cannon arm, mobility, a little sneaky Konami upside here. Yes, we see that early stage recklessness as well. 2 picks this last weekend, going 206 yards, 1 touchdown against the Titans. Not the best effort we've seen. It was sloppy, but as a Patriots fan, I'm very encouraged. I love what I'm seeing from this guy. I think he's clearly the franchise guy that I was hoping he would be. It's just a matter of the line is horrendous. The weapons are awful. I don't want to see him get killed this year in this horrible, horrible environment. But I do think we've got something special here. And for fantasy-wise, regardless of the weaponry here, the fact that he is tallying these long scrambles, 26 yards, 22 yards, he is just churning the fantasy points on the ground. And it's one of those situations where we've cited it time and time again, the Konami code, where 15 of 16 quarterbacks that average, 5.5 rush attempts per game, or 40 rush yards per game, which is right around where Drake May is. They finished top 10. Over half of those finished top 5. I'm not saying Drake May's ceiling could probably hit there with the weapons around him, but the floor is actually sneaky high because of that rushing upside. We're going to move on to the running back position now, but we've got 300 with us live as we get into minute 10 here. Love to see it. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please do consider that thumbs up button, helping us grow and get out to more people. I know I ask a lot. I know it can be a little annoying, but it does truly help us. It's why we are approaching 5,000 subs, and we are so happy to be able to say that, so proud of the growth we've had this year. So please do consider, if you like what you're hearing, you find it helpful, that thumbs up button, the like button on Twitter, the heart, the retweet, all that stuff really does go such a long way to beating the algorithm and helping your boy continue to grow. rotostreetjournal.com. Let's move on to the running back position, and I will first, just like last week, bring up the tweet here that I have. I tweet this out every Tuesday right around the morning time here after I get my nice little exercise bike in. Top 13 running back stashes and handcuff rankings. I had to expand this one to 13 this week. We'll just quickly list them down, and I have a few running backs I do want to make sure to focus on. Now jumping up to number 1 on the list is Ray Davis, out there in only 21% rostered right now. He is probably out there in your league, and you want to make sure to go scoop him. Then we got Algier, newly acquired Khalil Herbert on the Bengals, is all the way up to running back 3. We'll dive into why in just a second. Braylon Allen has fallen to 4, but still a great stash. Jaylen Warren has been dropped in over half a league, so he makes his debut here right around number 5. Najee's just a tank. I don't see him getting hurt, but if he does, Warren would erupt, as would Blake Corum, given that crazy usage we're seeing from Kyron Williams. Trey Benson makes his debut here at number 7. Kamani Vidal still holding down the fort at 8. J.K. Dobbins looking as good as ever, but Vidal would be a beast Peace, injury imp strikes. Roshan Johnson, we're going to dive into in just a sec. Justice Hill, Jalen Wright, Cam Akers, and Damian Pierce wrap up my top 15. And if you have an IR spot open, consider adding Keaton Mitchell. In fact, if you have it open, there's literally no reason not to. This guy was the second most efficient back in the league last year behind only Devon Achane. So scoop that guy now while you can, slap him into the IR. But let's talk about a handful of the names. I'm going to remove this for now, and let's dive into a handful of the names on this list here for the Week 10 waiver wire running backs. We mentioned Ray Davis. Just want to emphasize again that we saw already with this list, it's kind of hypothetical. What would these guys do if the starter got knocked out? We already saw that with Ray Davis. Over 80% of the running back rushes was a near every down snap player, 70% in that regard. And last week, we're starting to see him mix in more and more. Ripped a 70-yard receiving touchdown right down the heart of the defense. This guy is so talented. I loved him at Kentucky. Never stops churning those feet. Hits the hole super hard. I love this player. And so if he ever gets his opportunity for the Bills, he's going to be a low-end running back one, in my opinion. But the new name on this list is Khalil Herbert. I wrote about him this weekend going as a stash in case he got traded to the Dallas Cowboys was the expectation, the rumor, which would have been amazing. But maybe the second best possible spot is the Bengals, especially with news that Zach Moss is expected to miss the rest of the regular season here. Well, now we got a Chase Brown season. I get it. It already was becoming that way, and I still love the guy. 32 touches this last weekend. I have no issue with calling Chase Brown a potential league winner still. Nonetheless, Khalil Herbert is a very talented back. They get him for just a 7th-round pick, an absolute steal here. Let's dive into a few things about Khalil Herbert that I love. 15th, 35th, and 14th in PFF rushing grade since he's entered the league from 2021 to 2023. Just last year, Khalil Herbert was 12th in explosive run rate of 10-plus yards, and then he had 9th in missed tackles forced per game last year as well. And when he gets fed in 13 career games with 11-plus carries, Khalil Herbert's averaging 15.2 fantasy points per game. We've seen this guy erupt for over 25 fantasy points multiple times across his career. There is very, very real upside to Khalil Herbert. In games last year where he saw 43% of the snaps, he averaged 14 touches and 77.8 total yards per game. And we saw it this preseason, 18 carries for 97 yards, a 5.4 yards per pop. I know it's the preseason. It's not like this guy just suddenly lost his explosivity. He is a phenomenal back. And we had Zach Moss mixing in. Even while Chase Brown has taken his backfield over the last 2 to 3 weeks, we still were getting 8 to 10 carries or so from Zach Moss, about a 40% snap share there. I still, again, think this is the Chase Brown show, but we did have that presser there with Zach Taylor saying, yeah, we love what we're seeing in this new role. We want to keep it going, but we do need to bring something in here to take the load off of him, and that will be Khalil Herbert. And if anything did ever happen to Chase Brown, we'd be talking about a stretch run hero, an absolute league winner, given the way he put up numbers in a moribund, horrible Bears offense for years. If he got a chance to be the starter for this Bengals team, I think Khalil Herbert would go off. So he is right up there in my top 3 running back stashes now that he is a member of the Bengals. Now, in my top 8 running back stashes newly is Roshan Johnson, the guy that's left behind there in Chicago as the number 2 to DeAndre Swift. Now, Swift was healthy all last year, has not really missed a step, actually looked really solid here. It impressed me. I was one of the few busts I did not get right this year was DeAndre Swift. He has looked really solid. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is his back. Swift has missed 3+ games every year prior to last year. And now if he misses any time, it will be the Roshan show. Roshan already is showing some solid stuff. He scored 3 touchdowns in a 2-week span earlier this year, so we know he can get it done at the goal line. He does have a true 3-down skill set, was very solid prospect behind Bijan Robinson, actually averaged more missed tackles forced per attempt in college behind Bijan Robinson. So I do think Roshan has some talent, only 13% rostered, a guy to look at. One other guy debuting on this list this week is Trey Benson. He scores his first career touchdown at the NFL level, has 8 carries, 37 yards. That score also caught a target for 18 yards. And if you watch this guy in college, only a 42% success rate, a very boom bust runner, but he is among the rare backs in college, in the NFL, that can just knife through the defense for a 60-yard touchdown, a absolute size speed terror on the level of like a Breece Hall level size, speed, percentile rankings here. Now, I'm not saying he'll ever be a Breece Hall, but we do know if anything did ever happen to Connor, who did have to leave this game due to a back injury after he got absolutely leveled. He came back in. I don't think he's going to miss any time. But if he does, we are now seeing a multiple weeks now where Trey Benson became the lead ball carrier, particularly involved in the red zone. So, yeah, Amari DiMercato would likely be involved as a pass catcher. No, it probably would not be a 3-down workhorse role for Benson, despite the guy having the skill set to potentially do that. But we know the Connor injury woes throughout his career. He's missed at least 3 games in every single professional season. So I do think Trey Benson is a very solid stash here as we make it later and later into the year. The last running back I wanted to mention, the only new guy on that stash list, is Cam Akers. Seems like he has definitely leapt over Ty Chandler, who sees exactly 0 snaps. This last week was Ty Chandler, 16 snaps. Meanwhile, going to Cam Akers, he gets 6 touches and looked okay with him, 46 yards on 6 carries, and ultimately gets 2 catches for 7 yards as well, 6.6 points. Again, nothing crazy, but we know the history with Aaron Jones' soft tissue injuries. He has a hip injury already multiple times this year. And so ultimately, there's a real path for Cam Akers to become a starter in Kevin O'Connell's offense. And I know as a starter with Houston, it was nothing special at all. But we're talking a deep league stash here, only 6% rostered. If you have some space, you're looking for a running back, go up and get Cam Akers, given that injury history again, and just how good this offense has been as a whole. We are going to now move to the wide receiver position. But again, please consider that thumbs up button, Wolfpack, the heart button on Twitter. Help us beat that algorithm. And if you're new here, if you're watching the replay, please consider subscribing. We go live 3 times a week answering your questions. Keep filling that mailbag, guys. I love it. Lots of great questions already coming in here. I'll be answering those momentarily. But let's move on. The top Week 10 waiver wire receivers. For me, Juwan Jennings tops the list. And in fact, Juwan Jennings is the number 1 player on my waiver wire rankings this week. I would bid 15, 20%, maybe even a bit more, but I don't think you're going to have to, because I think a lot of people might be overlooking Juwan Jennings right now. Got caught in a lot of leagues, given he was hurt these past 2 weeks. And then the bye week, I would go check and see if Juwan Jennings is sitting there in your league, because Kyle Shanahan has said he's expected to get back this week. And it wasn't that long ago we saw Juwan Jennings put up 46.5 full PPR points. That was week 3 against the Rams. That is a top 10 wide receiver score of the past 10 years. Still, I believe, the highest score of the season, if not top 2 on that. And it's just been a really solid player when used, has Juwan Jennings. Top 3 in ASS score. That's the average separation score according to Fantasy Points. He's also top 15 in Pro Football Focus's grades so far. Juwan Jennings averaging 2.75 yards per route run. That's top notch right now. And we haven't even seen what this guy can do without Brandon Ayuk, because Jennings has been out of the lineup since that ACL tear for Ayuk. Now we know CMC, if he comes back, that's a volume magnet that changes the entire complexion of this offense. And Ricky Pearsall, he's been okay since he stepped in the lineup, but hasn't really commanded a ton of volumes. But it could become a rotation. That would make neither of these guys usable. But so far, it has clearly been Juwan Jennings when he's available as that next man up at wide receiver. So in his first game without Brandon Ayuk, given the way that we've seen Jennings thrive when on the field, he would be my number 1 claim. The only guy I really see with true just like league-winning upside, especially if something happened to Deebo Samuel. If you miss on Jennings or he's not available, Quentin Johnston got dropped in a ton of leagues, only 17% rostered right now. He returns and has a stellar showing. 4 catches, 5 targets, 118 yards, and a score for Johnston. 22 PPR fantasy points. I know he's boom or bust, but he has some really nice spikes on his resume so far this year. He saw a 19% target share. That's a number he has hit or topped in 4 of 6 games so far this year. 71% route participation. So even though he's not a full-time player, right up there, top 3 on the team there. And the big news with them, we talked about with Justin Herbert earlier, the uptick in passing as a whole for this attack. The Chargers, since the bye week, are top 10 in pass rate over expectation. We've seen them go from 23 pass attempts per game in those first 5 weeks to now over right around 35 pass attempts per game across their last 3. They have the both tackles healthy. Herbert looks great. Jim Harbaugh cannot stop raving about him. So I do think Quentin Johnston, this entire passing game, is on the rise. So Quentin Johnston, a big piece of that as well. And nobody required here at the trade deadline. A lot of speculation. Mike Williams, Darius Slayton might get moved there, but nope. Quentin Johnston showed enough. The team is happy to move forward with what they got. And I think he is a great add on the waiver wire behind only Jennings at wide receiver. Right behind him, and maybe I go back and forth between these two, are Xavier Legette. And both these guys, I would say, are worth 10%, 15% of fab, maybe even 20% if you need a wide receiver. We saw Legette score his 4th touchdown in his past 6 weeks, catches 4 of his 6 targets, 33 yards, and a score, and also rushes another one for 6 yards. That creative move around usage, get him involved in any type of way. Those targets led the team this week. A 93% route share, 25% target share, both were team highs, and ultimately as were his fantasy points. Since week 4, he's averaged 10.6 points per game. He's actually the wide receiver 23 is Xavier Legette. Plus, you just have the all-time GOAT celebration whenever he scores for your team. You can hang that on your opponent's head there. I really love the kid. He is an impressive athlete, first-round pedigree. So I like Xavier Legette. I love how he's performing here, and we all know Deontay Johnson's gone. Of course, that Jonathan Mingo trade wasn't really doing much because that guy wasn't stepping on the field anyways. But still, Bryce Young is getting some solid work in here with Xavier Legette. I was worried. Andy Dalton may be the only guy that can facilitate it. No, well, at least Bryce Young can get the ball to Xavier Legette so far. I also really like Demario Douglas. 22% roster, got dropped in a bunch of leagues, but he only has 2 full games right now with Drake May. Whether Drake May got hurt or whether Demario Douglas against the Jags, remember he got very sick, was puking, and did not return after halftime. Still, we've seen 21.2 and 10.5 fantasy points per game in his 2 full games with Drake May. He has seen 9 targets in both of those games. It was a 29% target share and a 23% target share. First game, he goes 9 targets, 6 catches, 92 yards, and that touchdown. This past week, 9 targets, 7 catches, a week, 35 yards. Nothing overly impressive, a very low ADOT. But Demario Douglas is that chain mover, the go-to guy for Drake May. Maybe, I remember in college, May played with Josh Downs, and we saw that. He loved Pepper in the slot when Downs was there. So I love what I'm seeing with Demario Douglas. Again, has 9 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. Great stuff from him. You need a bigger boom type of guy. Demarcus Robinson, these past 2 weeks have been insane. 45 fantasy points across his last 2 games, 4 touchdowns in that span. First one was pretty fluky, it seemed. 9% target share, pretty weak. But then 21% target share this last week. Saw 9 targets, 6 catches, 94 yards, and those 2 touchdowns, including the overtime game winner. Now, I know Puka was ejected, probably played a role in it, but we actually saw last year when Puka and Kupp were on the field, it benefited Demarcus Robinson feasting on those number 3 corners. He was a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy points per game, was on pace for well over 900 yards and nearly 12 touchdowns as a starter during that final 5-game stretch where he had 10 or more points in all 5. So it's not like you haven't seen this guy. I know most of his career he didn't show it, but last year we did get that stretch with the Rams, with Matthew Stafford, and we're starting to see him heat up now that Puka and Cooper Kupp are back. It is one of those rare situations where he actually might be better with those starters in front of him, drawing the defensive attention. We saw when they were removed, he could not sustain with top attention from defenses, but as the number 3 weapon, we know Stafford loves him. We know that he can get open deep down the field and make these huge plays. I do not think it's overly fluky, which everyone seems to suggest. I actually really do like Demarcus Robinson on this team. Did want to talk about real quick Mike Williams getting traded to the Steelers. Not the most ideal of landing spots. They are top 5 in terms of run rate and carries per game. It is a run-heavy attack. There's no doubt about that. Russell Wilson is uncorking a little bit of upside here for the passing game, particularly George Pickens. But that's why I'm on the fence here, because very similar skill sets, it would seem, with George Pickens and Mike Williams. Pickens, of course, younger, fresher, better at this stage of their careers, but 2 big bodies that can move as possession receivers, but more so better in those contested catch situations. Now, it does fit Mike Williams' skill set very well, though. Russ Wilson moon bombs down to the end zone. And just last year, I mean, before he got hurt, Mike Williams was killing it. He was the wide receiver 15 in fantasy. He was coming off a 13 and 8 target games in back-to-back weeks. He was playing this target hog role, like the big body. They called him like the Michael Thomas in this offense inspired role. And he was really doing well. So when you're looking at your waiver wire, it's very rare to find a wide receiver with the size and speed and the pedigree of Mike Williams here. And the way that Russ Wilson is starting to cook, hate to say it, but he is for these Steelers, the way that this skill set could mesh. And if anything did happen to Pickens, we could have a bona fide top 20 wide receiver moving forward. It does hurt Pickens, honestly, to have a guy like Mike Williams in there with, again, that similar skill set taking over some red zone looks as well. I have a hard time, given how run heavy they are, how much they want to just bleed you out and let the defense do their thing here. I have a hard time thinking there's going to be enough passing volume for Mike Williams and Pickens to routinely be consistent. I do think Pickens is going to be the clear number one here. So I like Mike Williams because I'm going to start getting into some deeper cuts. Like I'd rather have Mike Williams than, say, Ray McLeod, who's next on my list and somehow nearly doubled the ownership of Mike Williams. I don't understand why Ray McLeod is this owned, but hey, for a 1 week rental coming up, facing New Orleans Saints, a top 7 matchup for wide receivers. This is more so if Drake London ends up not playing, suffered a hip injury, I believe it ended up getting deemed here. Maybe it's an oblique. Different injuries reports coming out here. But either way, we did have Ray McLeod score a touchdown, caught 3 targets for 28 yards here. It ultimately scored right around 11 half PPR fantasy points. He had 4 very meaningless games leading into this one. I don't love the player. He's a completely different guy than Drake London, but there's going to be a gaping target gap there for Ray McLeod. So someone you could potentially look at there. And then the last deep cut on my list is Noah Brown, just 2% rostered, coming off a team high 31.6% target share this past week, leading the team there. He's the clear number 2 receiver behind only Terry McLaurin here. 8, 1, 6, and 6 targets these past 4 weeks. 1 real dud, but otherwise pretty solid volume coming from the rookie of the year, Jaden Daniels, in this offense, and has had 9.8 or more PPR points in 3 of his last 4 games. So a deep cut shout out for sure. And now we are going to transition to what I think is the most important position of the week. But as we do, we'd love to push over. We're at 390 right now. Would love to hit that 500 mark for the show. It's something we've done in 3 straight weeks, and we'd love to keep that going here, Wolfpack. It is a tough show to prepare for. It's a lot of content, and if it's not going to do much numbers, I know I've said it before, but we are getting to that point. You've got a home purchase this coming week up. It's just a crazy year at school. Might be something we will cut if it's not going to bring in the views. As much as I love doing it, as much as I love you guys, it is a lot of work. It seems like the juice might not be worth the squeeze these days, but do what you can if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up, sharing it out, subscribing to the channel. Show us the metrics do actually matter for this show, and we'd be happy to continue to do it for you good folks out there. As I was alluding to, this is the best waiver wire tight end week I think we've had all year. I believe tight end is the most important position to attack on this week's waiver wire. I think there are potential top 5 tight ends lurking in the weeds here. So let's dive on into my favorite options, starting at the top with Mike Gesicki, only 14% rostered. He's actually my number 2 overall pickup for the week behind only Jawan Jennings. And if you need a tight end, Brock Bowers, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft, there's some big names on bye this week. So go and check if Mike Gesicki is there. Now, I will say this is only a good play if T. Higgins is out, but his splits are absolutely insane with T. Higgins out of the lineup this week, the most impressive yet. 6 targets, 5 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, a whopping 27 PPR points here for Mike Gesicki. And in the 4 games without T. Higgins this season, Gesicki is averaging 15.1 points per game, even though he's only run 51% of the routes, because he sees a whopping 31% targets per route run in games without T. Higgins. He averages a 20% target share in those games and a 25% air yard share, which is massive for a tight end. And as we mentioned, this was the best week we've had of the year, although volume-wise, it wasn't the best we've seen. Given the 2 games before this one, Gesicki had at least 8 targets, at least 7 catches, and at least 70 yards in his previous 2 games without T. Higgins. So to see this monster blow-up touchdown performance, in addition to that elite volume, plus we had Eric All, prayers up for that rookie at ACL tear. He's had multiple now in his career in college. He tears the ACL in his first rookie season as a pro, but it could mean good numbers for Mike Gesicki, who could steady out at that 60% plus route share from Joe Burrow, who is on the record as saying, anytime we do not score a touchdown the rest of the year, I'm going to be pissed off. And you could see it on the sideline. Burrow was so lazy and, easy to do against the Raiders. What about the Ravens? Actually pretty easy to do too. One of the best matchups, top 3 for quarterbacks, top 3 for receivers, top 3 for tight ends. They are an abysmal pass defense, the Baltimore Ravens. So for Thursday Night Football, T. Higgins has not practiced yet this week. Assuming he is out, I'm going to have Mike Gesicki as probably a top 6 tight end. If that is the case, the matchup's right. The volume has been there whenever T is out. And Gesicki is playing really well. He's doing his part. He had a 47-yard catch and run, just knifing through the defense, a very acrobatic touchdown catch as well, using that big frame. And, of course, the gritty is beautiful for Mike Gesicki. But definitely a guy I would be looking at as my number 1 waiver wire fill-in for a Bowers for a Njoku. But you missed on him. Check out Taysom Hill. He had 60 total yards in the loss and a touchdown. Of course, 16 fantasy points. Would have been the tight end 6 in expected fantasy points with a top 5 tight end, given the production, a 49% route participation, 18% target share, 12% of the design rushing attempts, which is lower than you might expect for a guy like Taysom Hill. But ultimately, 41 yards through the air, 19 yards on the ground, and that touchdown. One of the only guys in the league that could literally throw and catch and run for a touchdown in a single game. I think it's only happened like one other time with Christian McCaffrey once. Maybe a couple other times. But yeah, very impressive skill set, very versatile, can get it done in any which way. And Atlanta, not a great defense to stop a guy like Taysom Hill. And given Chris Olave's injury, given who else do they have? We know Jamal Williams is doubtful. Bub Means is on the IR. Kendra Miller's on the IR. There are no other weapons here. So I think Taysom Hill is a great bet. And even if you just want to pick him up and use him as a flex, I think he is a very viable option. All these guys, I would say, fit this bill. So he's my number 3 overall pickup. And number 5 overall pickup for me is Hunter Henry, who's been phenomenal with Drake May. He has 7 catches on 8 targets, 56 yards against the Titans. And in Drake May's 3 full games, 13.6, 17.2, and 12.6 PPR points for Hunter Henry, seeing 5, 9, and 8 targets from Drake May, at least 41 yards in 4 straight games. For Hunter Henry, the tight end 9 across those last 4 weeks, averaging 13.1 fantasy points per game in that span. Just a rock-solid top 10 tight end. Sitting there in 70% of your leagues. Why not? Fire him up. A decent schedule, too, moving forward in terms of points allowed to the tight end position. And even if you miss on all 3 of these guys, they're not available in my league. Well, what about Jonnu Smith? Only 9% rostered. And this guy has really emerged since the bye week as a clear-cut every-down tight end for this team. That was the issue with Jonnu Smith early in the season. We'd get games with like 30% route share and mixing in with Durham Smythe, but not lately. He's, in fact, seen 75% or higher route share in 4 straight games, 83% route participation this past week. And in that span, these 4 weeks, 8, 7, 6, and 6 targets. Very, very steady volume here. A nice 9.6 PPR points for you this last week at tight end. I think we'll take that. And now these next 2 weeks gets the Rams, 6th most points allowed to tight ends, and then Raiders, 5th most points allowed to tight ends in the next 2 weeks. So if you need a streamer at the position since Tua returned, we were worried that Tua comes back and it's back to the Waddle and Tyreek Hill show, but Jonnu has remained a stalwart, continues to vacuum 6 to 8 looks a week. I love what I'm seeing from him. That wraps up at the 34-minute mark all of our players we're going to talk about. But as we always do, Wolfpack, we're going to hit my top Week 10 defensive streamers. And we will start with Chicago, 43% of rostered on Sleeper, so out there in nearly 60% of leagues. That is less on Yahoo. They're about 60% rostered. ESPN, though, they are also only about 40% rostered. So go out there and check. They are the clear-cut number 1 defense to add if they're available in your league, a top 5 defensive play this week, and potentially even number 1 on my rankings. They're definitely contending for that, considering the home matchup against the New England Patriots. The Bears defense is just flat out good. 3+ sacks in 6 of 8 games, 2+ turnovers in 6 of 8 games. They've held their opponents under 20 points in, you guessed it, 6 out of 8 games. This is a very strong defense, and they now get a top 5 matchup, 5th in points allowed to defensive positions. And yes, I get May Magic. Awesome last week. Loved what I saw. They're still dead last in total offense, dead last in passing offense, and 30th in overall scoring, ahead of only the Giants and Dolphins so far are the Patriots. They've allowed 31 sacks on the year, tied for 2nd most, one of the worst lines in the league. And Chicago is 10th in terms of sacks 23 of them on the year. They're tied for fourth with 15 takeaways. And New England hasn't been the most turnover-prone team, but Drake May, we just saw the 2 picks last week, can get a little reckless at times. So if Chicago's out there, they are far and away the number 1 defense. But if not, how about the New York Football Giants? Yes, Washington just absolutely bludgeoned them, made a useless defensive performance there, but they were averaging the Giants 10 points per game across their previous 4, including a 19.7 sack effort against Seattle. In fact, the Giants are number 1 in the league in sack rate. They're 15th in the league in pressure rate, and that could cause problems for a bottom 5 line with these Carolina Panthers. Now, the Saints, they did not come through last week as a defensive streamer in this beautiful matchup. That's because they have a bottom 3 pass rush. We're talking about a top 5 pass rush here for the New York Giants, who are 4.5-point favorites there for the London game. So if they get that early lead, pin those ears back, and get after Bryce Young, we could be looking at yet another 6 to 8 sack performance. A masterpiece could be there for the Giants. I think their ceiling is massive. You miss on both of these. Falcons, I don't want to overly endorse them, but a game against New Orleans, who has given the most points up to fantasy defenses across the last 4 weeks, I get it. A few of those games did come with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, but 2 of them did feature Derek Carr, and they've given up 8 or more fantasy points in both of his last few starts. Last time the Falcons played the New Orleans Saints, they had 17 points as a defensive unit, including 2 touchdowns. And now New Orleans is even more barren on the weapons cabinet with no Chris Olave for the foreseeable future. Dennis Allen getting fired, which might be a boost to this offense, if anything. I don't know how much worse it can get. That's what the issue is with me, is it's not a great defense overall for Atlanta. They're 24th in defensive scoring so far. Middle of the league with those 10 turnovers on defense, but dead last with only 9 sacks. But I think this team could get after this Saints offense. Their line is really banged up. They have no playmakers. Carr is holding the ball at a very high rate, just dinking and dunking to Kamara when he gets under pressure. But we could see some more sacks coming in here. They just had a 3-sack effort against Dallas, did this Falcons defense. They had 3 turnovers against Tampa Bay the week before, so they're starting to heat up. They're starting to cook. Now, I always want to be wary of that interim coach pump. You got a guy named Darren Rizzi coming in here, so that also has to give you a little pause of using the defense against a Darren Rizzi. But he's a special teams coordinator for his career. I don't expect him to inject much life, if anything, into this offense as a whole. So that wraps up Wolfpack. All of my waiver wire pickups of the week, the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends that you need to scoop. We'll move on to the mailbag with over 400 of you here. You do like to see it. Would love to see some more, so please do consider that thumbs up button, the like, the heart, the share, the retweet to please help us get out to more people and make this worth the stream every week. Casey White wondering if I should look to improve his team. Josh Allen, D. Henry, Ken Walker, great running back and quarterback duos there. Ramondre, awesome third back. Daddle, Neighbors, Flowers. You got a great squad here. I would say, looking through it, Cooper, Jawan, Bowers, great tight end. The weakest part of your roster probably is receiver. You know that too. If you could sell high, like pair Dowdle and Pickens now with Mike Williams there, for example, and maybe upgrade your wide receiver 3 spot so you have Neighbors, Flowers, and a more confident third than Pickens or Cooper. Maybe Cooper emerges as that guy as he gets more and more familiar and healthy in this offense. I just don't love it. Maybe Juwan Jennings becomes that guy. But right now, your wide receiver 3 spot's the biggest issue I see, Casey. So if you can maximize your Dowdle coming off that 20-point day, you're still never going to use him with those running backs ahead of him. And I do think that's going to be more of an outlier game for him. So if you could pair him and Pickens or him and Cooper and see if you could upgrade that 3 receiver spot, that's what I would look to do, Casey. Willie G, great to see you, Mr. Massey. Wondering if I should look to improve my team through trading or just be content. This seems you must be the same person here, Casey White and Willie G. Massey, coming from both channels there. But you just heard my kind of analysis there. Who to pick up at QB for the rest of season, Tua or Herbert? I do prefer Herbert. As you saw, I ranked them Herbert, then Rodgers, then May. Tua I'd probably have right after Herbert, but I do prefer Herbert in the way this offense is starting to cook. Is Worthy or Juju a drop for Gesicki? I'd get rid of Juju at this point. Absolutely. DeAndre Hopkins, the show, and Worthy, honestly, could be a drop too, but I do think Gesicki is very, very viable. I would definitely drop Juju for him. And especially if T is out, I would, in a heartbeat, start Gesicki over Kincaid this week. What's up, Yo Soy Tony? Pick up Rome or Addison to plug and play this week. If you have to play one of them, I'd lean Addison. Who are they facing this week? I remember right now, is it the Jags? Yes, it is the Jags. One of the best spots you could possibly ask for receivers, for passing games in general. So I like Addison this week. Trade Daniel Jones for Sutton in a super flex. Yeah, if you're set at quarterback like you are, then absolutely. Yeah, Sutton's a target hog right now. If you need that wide receiver help, you have depth. Daniel Jones, there's a clause in his contract. Like if he gets hurt, they have to guarantee him the money next year. So I think if he has one or two more stinkers, he's going to be on the bench the rest of the year. So I would definitely pull that trigger. And smash that like, says Yo Soy Tony. Thank you so much, Yo Soy Tony. Absolutely. Please do smash that like, the heart on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel. We'd love to keep growing this thing, baby. What up, Bulldog? Great to see you, brother. Should I drop Taysom for Gesicki for this week or roll with Taysom? If I had to pick one, I would roll with Gesicki, but that is very contingent on T. Higgins being out. So if we get any positive news that T's going to play, Gesicki could become that 0.8. The floor is a little bit lower here with Gesicki. I do think Taysom, especially with all these injuries, he's going to have a nice 6 to 12-ish range with that 20-plus point upside because he could do 2 touchdowns at any given moment. But right now, is with the info we have, assuming T. Higgins is out, I do prefer Gesicki in a great spot against the Ravens. Trade JSN for Jay Taylor. Absolutely, I would do that deal. Depends on your team needs, of course, but I think I'd be absolutely spiking, selling high here on him. Tua or Justin Herbert rest of season. Like I said, Bulldog, I do go Justin Herbert in that one. Thoughts on Khalil Herbert and Mike Williams? So Tyler, we covered them on the show, so you probably heard those already, but just a quick summary of that. I do think Khalil Herbert is one of the best handcuffs with benefits in the league moving forward. If something happened to Chase Brown, you'd be talking about a league winner, given his efficiency, especially when he's given volume. And then Mike Williams, unless there's an injury to George Pickens, I think they're going to kind of nibble at each other's cheese with more of the mouse, the bigger mouth there being George Pickens. But I do like the jump ball skill set. I think it's going to fit very well with Russ Wilson. I just think it's going to be a little inconsistent given how run heavy they are. Herbert or Roshan? I do prefer Herbert in that case, Tyler. How about Estime? That's a great question, Frizz. I do think he probably would have been 14 on that running back list. I should have had him listed there. I heard a stat, I believe it was Sam Sherman on the Underdog show, had a great stat where in 102 carries for Javonte Williams, he has 8 10-plus yard carries in 15 carries on the season. So, 10% of what Javonte has gotten. Estimate already has 4. He's already gotten half of the explosive runs of Javonte Williams on a 10% of the carries, on only just 15 carries. So I do like Estimate, and we do have Sean Payton, who I don't buy a single word that comes out of his mouth ultimately, but he did say he wants to get Estimate more and more involved. So, yeah, I think he's a great name to toss out here. I appreciate you, Frizz, bringing him up. I can get Quentin or Legette, but I think Mike Williams, we've got the track record. We've got the pedigree with Mike Will. I just don't think the situation's all that good, Tyler. How would you rank waiver wire pickups? Ray Davis, Cam Akers, Quentin Johnston, or Roshan Giuseppe? I already went through them all. So hopefully you got that ranking. I would say depends on your team needs, but Ray Davis or Quentin would be the top 2 for me there. Also, I love Ray Davis's talent and running style. I think they might be better with it. I mean, he is a beast, but Will, it's interesting to think because, could he be like an Emmitt Smith, a break you down, that short, stocky frame? He's got that type of skill set. I mean, Emmitt Smith is obviously a legend. I don't know if we can project Ray Davis to be that, but I do get where you're drawing that name, that similarity. It is interesting to think, could he pound the defense more and then allow Cook to come in and offer some electricity, the thunder and lightning backfield duo? I absolutely could see them evolving to that the more and more we see Ray Davis thrive, but I wouldn't sit here and say that he's better than James Cook. James Cook brings a lot more speed and upside and receiving and a lot of great stuff to the table too. But I do really like what I'm seeing from Ray Davis. There's no doubt about it. I think his role will continue to grow. Like, share, and subscribe, says Giuseppe. My man, thank you so much. Rather pick up Quentin Johnston or Elijah Moore? I think I'd rather have Quentin at this point. Yeah. Got offered Ken Walker for Pollard and Waddle. I'd rather have Ken Walker out of that deal. Absolutely. Jack. Jordan Mason, a drop. Lucius asks, I don't think yet. I think this will be a very telling week. Is CMC fully healthy? Is it Garendo who comes in before Jordan Mason? If something did happen to CMC, if it gets aggravated, we've seen how good Mason has been this year. I do think Garendo would force more of a 50-50 split if CMC ever missed time. So I don't know how valuable Mason would be should you hang on to him. But I can't drop him yet. I want to see CMC make it through a game. I want to see who comes in first after him. Maybe we don't even see Garendo active. You don't know how it's going to play out, and we know how good Mason's been. So unless you really have no one else to drop Lucius, I think you're throwing him a little too early if you toss him at the curb. What's up, Robert? Denver D's available. Pittsburgh D's available. Should I grab them and replace Houston? Yeah, absolutely. Houston stinks. I would say either of those defenses are better. I have Otten with Prescott on IR. Would you cut Ferguson or no? I love Otten. No, I would definitely keep Otten. Could you cut Ferguson? Maybe, but we might get that backup connection too with Cooper Rush. A bit early for sit start, but Tracy or BTJ have PPR Bulldog. Like you said, it's a little early. I don't have the full – I don't memorize the matchups this early in the week. Certainly will give you a better read on Tuesday. I do know that Tracy does have the Panthers because I have Tracy on my own team. And then I guess the Vikings for BTJ. So we're talking, the number one matchup for running backs and number one matchup for receivers. So that's really tricky. I'd love to see BTJ practicing in full this week. It just didn't seem like he was fully healthy coming off his injury. So as of right now, I'm going to go Tracy, but that's a really tough one, Bulldog. And thank you so much, Bulldog, for also sharing your kind words. I really like it. Thanks for the stream. It's more laid back, low key. Your work's appreciated. I appreciate you showing up each and every time. You guys, I know I keep just saying, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it. It is, my time's just getting so tight. We got a lot of exciting news I'm going to share on a stream soon. It's just going to be tough to keep doing it if it's not getting, moving the needle much. But the reason I can keep coming back for now is guys like you, Bulldog, who continue to show up time and time again. So it's so greatly appreciated. Thank you for your kind words. And last comment we got here is Randy Malik. Would you rather roster Coker or Demarcus Robinson? I'm thinking it's Robinson. The way he thrives when all those guys are out there seems to be a little bit more upside. I think Coker, I'm a Holy Cross guy. I love the narrative. I hope he continues to thrive in a dynasty league. I'm very intrigued. But with Bryce Young at QB, I just see it being so capped. Number 2 to 3 weapon on a Bryce Young-led offense or a Matthew Stafford-led offense. I have my choice there. And I like Trey Benson as stash. He's number 7 on my running back stashes, Randy. I talked about them earlier. Feel free to rewind it. You'll see a Twitter graphic. You can see all of my top 13, or you can follow me at Rose Street Wolf, where I have that tweet as well. I already will pack all of our waiver wire content, all of our content, my rest of season rankings, my week 10 rankings, all of that will be up and live at rotostreetjournal.com. You can see it right here. You can shop rotostreetjournal.com, shop.rotostreetjournal.com. If you want some gear like I'm rocking here and supporting your boy and rocking it around the country would be awesome. So cool. But on your way out, that thumbs up button. One last plea for the heart on YouTube or Twitter, wherever you're at. The shares, it really does go such a long way. Push this thing over the edge. Make it so we have to come back week in and week out. I do love doing it. It just is a huge time suck. So if it doesn't justify the time with it getting tighter and tighter right now, might have to cut it. So please do consider. And I know, Will, everybody, you've had some great comments. I really do appreciate it. I truly do. It's just becoming a business decision at this point. What is worth the time and what is not, because money's getting tight and I need it right now. So thank you guys again so much. I really appreciate you being here. In a world full of fancy sheep, guys, be the wolf. I'll be live Thursday at 6:30 p.m. for your sit starts on Thursday Night Football. Let's go.